Good morning, Jesse with Nexus Property Management out of the Worcester office. Continuing my docu-series on evictions here in the state of Massachusetts. Today will be my final video, and I will be discussing what the process is once you get to court for a eviction for not for cause evictions. So to start with, assuming you have done all your paperwork correct, which is basically send the tenant a notice to terminate tenancy on the last day of a month and giving them at least 30 days notice. If the tenant refuses to leave at that point in time, you can file for eviction. And really what that looks like is first tier, as they refer to it, it's similar to for cause termination or notice to quit evictions. But the first tier is you meet with a mediator to go through a potential mutual agreement to get the unit back. Most of the times we find that the tenant understands. Usually they're upset because they want to stay for whatever reason. They don't want to deal with the headache and the cost and the stress that goes with finding a new apartment. But either way, they understand they have to move out. Once they get to court, they usually know we mean business, and a lot of times their attitude will change. And so what will happen is we'll sit down, we'll let them know that, we want the unit back as soon as possible. And they will say, I understand, but I need some time to find a new apartment. Fine, you need some time to find a new apartment. If that is the case, then you need to pay for what is referred to as room and occupancy that is equal to the rent for the next negotiated term. Usually 60 days, sometimes 90 days, but the courts will allow this in a not for cause. So it's something that you need to be willing to do. Most owners want the tenants out as soon as possible, but a lot of times that's just not realistic with these cases. So the ultimate goal is to, rent time in your unit. So if you can get the rent, if you can get funds for time and occupancy, consider that a win. If they owe some back rent, a lot of times we won't just offer it up right off the bat, but we'll ask them, are you intending to pay the back rent plus room and occupancy moving forward? And we'll find out what their response is. Sometimes they will have applied for what is referred to as RAFT, which is basically public assistance to help them get their rent that they're in arrears for caught up. Even if they get it caught up, RAFT will still pay the landlord for that time. The owner can either accept or deny working with RAFT. It is fully up to them. You can still accept those funds and then work out a date to have the tenant move out later. So sometimes it's worth getting those funds, allowing the tenant a little bit longer to live there. The tenant will have to provide RAFT with what their plan is. A lot of times they will help them with their arrears as well as giving them moving assistance to find a new place. Just depends on what their personal financial situation is. So you work out an agreement. They are going to pay. They're not going to pay the funds that they're in arrears for. If they're not going to pay it, you still just got to move forward. Unfortunately, you have to chalk that up as a loss. That's why we always say here at Nexus is once a tenant starts to become past due, you owe it to yourself to get going on the eviction process as soon as possible. Obviously, there's costs associated with that, but the longer you wait, that dollar amount of their amount that they're in arrears for is going to do nothing but grow, and you're still going to have that eviction cost on top of it. They either are or they're not going to pay the amount in arrears. They're going to stay there, say, for 60 days. That 60 days is now up. A lot of times what will happen is the tenant prior to that 60 days will file a motion and say, hey, I need more time in the apartment, and they drag us back into court. So we go into court. The judge will ask them, okay, so you need more time. They will ask us if we are willing to give them more time. I think it's kind of a courtesy, but 99% of the time the judge is going to allow it because it's a not for cause case. And that is also assuming that they have been paying their room and occupancy and abiding by the agreement. The judge can give them up to 6 months to stay there, sometimes 12 months, depending on their personal circumstances. A lot of times if they're handicapped, elderly, and I believe if they have children, they can give them up to 12 months. But if they don't qualify for that, they can only give them 6 months. So he can give them up to 6 months. So the tenant says, hey, I need another 30 days. The judge allows it. They have to continue to pay their room and occupancy. Usually once you get to that, if they say, hey, I just need another 30 days, they usually have something worked out. They're waiting for the unit to be ready to move in. And usually it's over after that. If after the 60 days, they haven't moved out and they haven't asked the courts for more time, that's when they're usually not following the rules. They can get a little bit stickier. So now all of a sudden we have to file for, get in front of the judge and say, hey, listen, the agreement said they had to be out on such and such a date. They weren't. We would like to have the execution. The judge will now ask them, why weren't you guys out? They will say, we needed more time to find another apartment. The judge will give them a little slap on the wrist and say, well, you should have reached out to the courts prior to the agreement running out. Make sure that that happens moving forward. He will ask us if they have been paying their room and rent or the room and occupancy. If they have been, then once again, he's usually going to allow the tenants to stay there longer. Third case scenario, an agreement is reached. They're going to get 60 days. They're not going to pay their back rent. Usually they have to have paid us the room and occupancy within 1 week's time. Say they haven't paid that room and occupancy the first time it's due. Even the second, say they get 60 days, say it's even the second time. You usually want to wait at least 10 days before filing with the courts for an eviction, requesting an execution for non-compliance with the agreement. The reason being is, once again, tenant-friendly state, the judges tend to be a little lenient and will give them an extended period of time. Oh, sorry, Your Honor, we just didn't get it. We had a little mix-up with our banking. I've heard it all. But if they get it to you within that 10 days, and if you filed for all this and spent money on an attorney, you've just kind of wasted money, in my opinion. So I would wait until at least 10 days after it was due, and then if they haven't, then file for the request for execution for non-compliance to the agreement. From there, when that happens, if they haven't paid within 10 days, you file for a request for execution for non-compliance with the agreement. Usually the judge is going to rule in favor of the landlord at that point in time and say, you didn't abide by the agreement. The landlord was willing to give you some additional time. At this point in time, we cannot offer you any additional time. Request for execution is granted. And 10 days later, we're requesting our execution, and then we're moving the tenant out. Hopefully they move out on their own. If they don't move out on their own, once again, the landlord is responsible for paying for a constable to serve the tenant and physically move them out, as well as paying for a moving company to pack their items up and move them to a storage facility. Once moved to a storage facility, the tenant is then responsible, if they want their items back, to pay for the storage fee. That's really kind of what the couple different paths that we tend to see here at this office when we do a eviction not for cause. As you can see, it's a little less stickier all around, because there's not really the ability to have the parties argue over the condition of the apartment, what the landlord did, what they didn't do. And in my opinion, it can just be a little bit more straightforward, and it can usually wind up with the tenant moving out quicker, which to me is the ultimate goal once you've reached this point with a tenant. If you're in court with a tenant, your number one goal should be to get them out as soon as possible. Once again, if you sit there and you try and negotiate, or you're worried about the money that they owe you from back rent, that back rent amount is going to continue to grow. So I'm a landlord myself. I hate to see that money get just washed away. Doesn't seem right, doesn't seem fair. You can take it to a collections agency and try and recoup the funds through a collections agency. But that's why your number one goal should be to try and just get the tenants out as soon as possible. So once again, this is Jesse with Nexus Property Management here in Worcester. I hope you have enjoyed this docu-series on evictions here in the state of Massachusetts. In total, it's probably about an hour worth of time that I did for these. So I tried to be thorough. I tried to keep your guys' attention. Please post any questions, comments that you might have. I do want to just say that I am not an attorney. We always hire an attorney for all eviction cases that we do. It is in your best interest to either hire us as your agent to work with our attorney to try and get the tenant out on your behalf. You're not getting called in for emergencies, motions, just prior to a tenant moving out. As an example, we have a tenant that we are scheduled to move out on Tuesday. On Thursday, we've sent the tenant a 48-hour pre-notice issued by the constable stating that we have the constable and the moving company in place to be at your property on Tuesday. This was the Thursday before, so we gave them more than 48 hours. I'm making this video after the whole Microsoft IT downage that happened because we got called into court on that day. Well, unfortunately, the courts couldn't open up their computer systems. And guess what? Not only did we get notice on Thursday night that we had to be in court on Friday, but then it got canceled on Friday and we had to be in court on Monday. So these are some of the issues that landlords are going to be faced if they try and tackle this on their own. We here at Nexus, this is top priority. Get tenants out. We will cancel meetings. It's not in the best interest of us, but it is in the best interest of our owners that we work for, and we make this a priority. We want to help you get the bad tenants out, the good tenants in, and just keep moving forward. So if you try and do this on your own, make sure you hire an attorney. Once again, I'm not an attorney. This is just purely my opinion, my experiences, having been through several evictions now in the last few years. And I just wanted to share what my experiences are, just to try and help educate you guys, as well as paint the picture of what evictions look like here in the state of Massachusetts based off our experience. Once again, Jesse with Nexus Property Management here in Worcester. Have a great day. Thank you.